I stood on the bridge of the USS Connecticut, watching depth readings tick downward on the main display. The massive nuclear submarine hummed around me, a familiar vibration I'd felt through my boots for most of my naval career. 23 years of service, and this would be my final mission before retirement. Something about that didn't sit right with me. "Passing 800 feet, Captain," called out the diving officer. I nodded, keeping my face neutral despite the unease crawling up my spine. The briefing for this mission had been unusually light on details. Navigate to these coordinates in the Pacific and wait for further instructions. No mission objective, no explanation for why we were here. Just get there and wait. The control room buzzed with the quiet efficiency I'd come to expect from my crew. They were professionals, the best the Navy had to offer, but I noticed the small signs of tension. Backs too straight, voices too controlled, eyes darting to screens more frequently than necessary. They felt it too. "Sonar, report," I said. "Still picking up those formations, sir," Robert Torres answered, his young face illuminated by the glow of his station. "They're massive, should be visible on navigational charts, but..." He trailed off. But they weren't. According to every official chart, we were descending into empty ocean. Yet Robert's sonar showed enormous structures below us, rising from the seafloor like a submerged mountain range. I moved closer to the navigation station where David Kim was methodically rechecking our position. "Any drift in our coordinates?" I asked. "No, sir," David replied without looking up. "We're exactly where we're supposed to be. GPS confirmed before we submerged, and INS tracking is solid." I felt a presence at my shoulder and turned to find Lucas Martinez, my XO and oldest friend aboard. The lines around his eyes had deepened over the years we'd served together, but his gaze remained sharp, missing nothing. "Can I have a word, Captain?" he asked quietly. We moved to the rear of the bridge, away from the crew but still within sight of the main systems. Lucas kept his voice low. "Jim, something about this stinks. We've got no mission parameters. We're heading to a location that officially doesn't exist, and now we're picking up structures that aren't on any charts." I rubbed the scar on my left cheek, an old habit when thinking. I know, command was deliberately vague. Admiral Phillips only said it was need to know and we'd receive further instructions at the coordinates. "In 20 years working together, have you ever been sent somewhere without knowing why?" Lucas pressed. "No," I admitted. "Not like this." Lucas glanced at the crew before continuing. "The men are talking. They can tell this isn't normal." "What do you think we're dealing with here?" I asked. He shook his head. "Could be a test of some new underwater monitoring system. Could be we're surveilling another nation's activities. But those formations..." He frowned. "They look almost architectural." A cold weight settled in my stomach. Lucas wasn't prone to flights of fancy. If he thought the structures looked artificial, that carried weight. "Let's maintain course for now," I said. "We follow orders until we have reason not to." "Yes, sir," Lucas replied, his expression making it clear he wasn't satisfied. I returned to the center of the bridge, trying to project the confidence my crew needed to see. The Connecticut continued its descent, the pressure hull creaking occasionally as we pushed deeper. "Passing 1,500 feet, announced the diving officer. I moved to stand behind Robert at the sonar station. "Show me what you're seeing." Robert's fingers moved across his controls, bringing up a three-dimensional rendering of the seafloor below us. The structures were even more distinct now, massive shapes rising from the ocean floor, some connected by what looked like bridges or pathways. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" I asked. "No, sir," Robert said, shaking his head. "These aren't natural formations. They're too regular, too organized." I studied the screen, a chill running through me. "Could be coral structures." "Not at this depth, sir," Robert replied. "And not with these dimensions." "How far to the coordinates?" 3 nautical miles, sir." I straightened up. "Maintain course and speed." As we closed in on our destination, I noticed something strange about the water around us. Our external lights seemed to penetrate less distance than normal, as if the darkness was somehow thicker. The view screens showed only murky blackness beyond our immediate surroundings. "Captain," called Sarah Chen from the communication station. "I'm picking up something unusual." I crossed to her station. "What is it?" "It's what I'm not picking up, sir," she said, adjusting her headset. "The ambient ocean noise is gone. No whale songs, no biological signatures, nothing. It's completely silent out there." The entire bridge crew paused for a moment, the implications sinking in. The ocean was never silent. Never. "Could be equipment malfunction," I suggested, though I didn't believe it. "I've run diagnostics twice," Sarah replied. "All systems are functioning normally. There's just nothing to hear." The overhead lights seemed to flicker slightly, though I might have imagined it. The crew's movements became more deliberate, voices dropping to near whispers as if they feared being overheard. 2,000 feet, announced the diving officer, approaching maximum operational depth. Lucas returned to my side. "Jim, we should consider holding position here until we get better readings." I nodded slowly. "Helm, all stop. Hold position at current depth." "All stop, aye," the helmsman responded, easing back on the controls. The submarine slowed its descent until we hung motionless in the water, the massive structures still below us, just at the edge of our sonar range. "Captain," Robert called suddenly, his voice tight. "I'm getting new readings. There's movement down there." I moved quickly to his station. "What kind of movement?" "I can't tell exactly. It's big, sir. Really big. And it's moving toward our position." Lucas leaned over Robert's other shoulder, studying the sonar display with a deep frown. "That can't be right. Check your calibration." "I did, sir. Twice. Whatever it is, it's about 200 yards beneath us and rising fast." I stared at the display, watching as the amorphous shape moved upward through the water with impossible speed for something of its size. The sonar signature pulsed and shifted, unlike anything I'd seen in decades of submarine service. "Should we move to intercept?" Lucas asked quietly. I hesitated, years of training battling against the instinct screaming at me to get as far away as possible. "No. Hold position. Let's see what we're dealing with." The control room fell completely silent as we all watched the screens. The only sound was the low hum of the submarine systems and the occasional creak of the pressure hull. 100 yards and closing, Robert reported, his voice barely above a whisper. The darkness outside our viewports seemed to deepen, pressing against the thick glass like a living thing. Our external lights cut through it less and less effectively, creating the unsettling impression that we were being swallowed by the depths. 50 yards, Robert said. I gripped the back of his chair, eyes fixed on the sonar display. Whatever was rising toward us moved with purpose, its massive form now clearly visible on the screen. "Sir," Lucas said quietly beside me, "I think we should power up the emergency systems." I nodded, unable to shake the feeling that we were being hunted. "Do it." Lucas moved off to give the orders while I remained at the sonar station, watching as the unknown entity continued its approach. "Captain," Robert's voice cracked slightly. "It's stopped. It's holding position directly beneath us, about 30 yards down." The entire bridge crew held their breath. No one moved. No one spoke. "All stations, maintain position," I ordered, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. "Continue monitoring. Let's find out what we're dealing with before we make any moves." As the words left my mouth, the lights on the bridge dimmed momentarily, then returned to full brightness. Several crew members exchanged nervous glances. "Engineering, report," I called over the intercom. "All systems normal, Captain," came the reply. "We had a small power fluctuation, but backups kicked in immediately. No issues with the reactor." I walked slowly to the nearest viewport, peering out into the blackness. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement, a suggestion of something vast sliding through the water just beyond our lights. "Sir," Robert said behind me, his voice strained. "Whatever it is, it's starting to move again." I turned back to face the bridge, meeting Lucas's concerned gaze across the room. "Battle stations," I ordered. Quietly, "I want every system ready but running silent." As the crew moved to comply, I returned to the viewport, squinting into the darkness. For just a second, I could have sworn I saw a pattern of lights moving through the black water, pulsing like a heartbeat. Something massive was out there, watching us, measuring us, and I had the sickening feeling that our classified mission had just found us instead. The impact came without warning. One moment I stood at the viewport staring into the murky depths, and the next I slammed against the bulkhead with bone-jarring force. The submarine pitched violently to starboard, sending tools and equipment flying across the control room. My shoulder took the brunt of the collision, pain radiating down my arm as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Emergency alarms wailed throughout the Connecticut, their piercing cry cutting through the confusion. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in a hellish glow as the main lights sputtered and dimmed. Across the room, a navigation console erupted in a shower of sparks, forcing the operator to lurch backward, arms raised to protect his face. "What the hell was that?" I shouted, my voice nearly lost in the cacophony of alarms and the groaning of stressed metal. Lucas had already sprung into action, steadying himself against the tilting deck as he pushed toward the damage control station. His face was set in grim determination, eyes darting between screens as the situation reports flooded in. I grabbed the nearest handhold and pulled myself upright, fighting against the increasingly steep angle of the floor. The submarine wasn't just listing, it was being pulled downward. The depth gauge spun at a sickening rate, numbers climbing far faster than our diving capabilities should have allowed. "Engineering, report," I called into the intercom. Static answered me, punctuated by distant shouting. The hull creaked around us, metal protesting under pressures it was never designed to withstand. We were already well below our crush depth, yet somehow the pressure hull was holding. My mind refused to accept the depth readings as they continued to climb. "Passing 4,000 feet, someone called out, voice tight with disbelief. The radio crackled to life. Lucas's voice cut through the chaos, his words sending ice through my veins. "Captain, Jim, you need to see this." His voice sounded strange, stretched thin with terror. "There's something. It's got the ship. Massive tentacles wrapped around the hull. They're glowing, pulsing like a heartbeat." I staggered toward the nearest viewport, pressing my face against the cold glass. The external light still functioned, illuminating a scene that my brain struggled to process. Wrapped around our hull was something that defied comprehension. Enormous tentacles, thicker than a man was tall, coiled around the submarine's midsection. Their surface rippled with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in hypnotic sequence, bright blue-green light flowing in waves along their length. Where our lights struck the creature's main body, I could see only a fraction of its mass disappearing into the darkness below. The Connecticut, a nuclear submarine nearly 400 feet long, seemed like a toy in its grasp. As I watched in horror, one tentacle tightened its grip, the metal of our outer hull buckling like aluminum foil. Water began to spray from ruptured seams, quickly turning from mist to pressurized jets as more systems failed. "All hands, prepare to..." My order was cut short as the submarine lurched again, this time with such violence that I was thrown completely off my feet. The intercom crackled with Lucas's voice once more. "It's breaking through the pressure hull in engineering. There's more than one, dozens of smaller appendages cutting through the..." His words dissolved into the sounds of rushing water and screaming. "Lucas!" I shouted into the comm system. "Lucas, respond!" The only answer was static, then silence. I knew in that moment my oldest friend was gone. The deck pitched at an impossible angle as the creature dragged us deeper. Loose equipment tumbled past me as gravity seemed to shift. Emergency bulkhead doors began slamming shut automatically throughout the ship, the hollow booms echoing through the corridors like funeral drums. "Abandon ship," I ordered, my voice steadier than I felt. "All hands abandon ship immediately." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. We were thousands of feet below the surface, far beyond the reach of any rescue. The order was a formality, a captain's final duty to his crew. Sarah Chen appeared at my side, blood streaming from a cut above her eye. "Captain, the mini-sub is still operational. Deck 3, Section 8. The emergency mini-submarine was our last hope, a small rescue vessel designed to detach from the main submarine in worst-case scenarios. It could hold 6 people at most. "Move," I ordered, pushing her toward the exit. "Get to the mini-sub now." We fought our way through tilting corridors, water already ankle-deep in some sections. The submarine's dying groans surrounded us, punctuated by distant explosions as systems overloaded or imploded under pressure. We found David Kim already at the mini-sub's hatch, working frantically to prepare the launch sequence. His hands moved with practiced efficiency despite the chaos around us. "Engineering's gone," he reported without looking up. "Reactors scrammed, but cooling systems are compromised." Robert Torres stumbled around the corner, helping a badly injured sailor who collapsed at our feet. Robert knelt to check for a pulse, then looked up at me with empty eyes, shaking his head. "No one else is coming," he said. Bulkheads sealed off the rest of the ship. I did a quick count. Just the 4 of us had made it. Out of a crew of more than 100, only 4 had reached the mini-sub. "Get in," I ordered, helping Sarah through the small hatch while David completed the pre-launch checks. Robert climbed in after her, and I took one last look down the flooded corridor before following. The mini-sub's interior was cramped, designed for function rather than comfort. David sealed the hatch behind us and moved to the controls. Water was already seeping through the seal, suggesting the Connecticut's hull around us was failing. "Launch now," I said, strapping myself into the pilot's seat beside him. David hit the emergency release. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then came a series of metallic clangs as the docking clamps disengaged, and we were free. The mini-sub's thrusters pushed us away from the dying Connecticut. Through the small porthole, I watched as our submarine was pulled ever deeper, its hull buckling and twisting as the creature's limbs tightened their grip. The bioluminescent patterns seemed to pulse more rapidly now, almost excited. As we rose, I kept my eyes fixed on the viewport, unable to look away from the death of my ship and crew. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed everything was the Connecticut's hull collapsing inward, crushed by the pressure and the creature's impossible strength. Then even the creature's glowing appendages faded from view as our mini-sub ascended, leaving my ship and the remains of my crew to the abyss. I watched the depth gauge with growing dread as the mini-submarine continued its inexorable descent. We had been rising, I was certain of it, but something had changed. The small vessel had suddenly lurched and started plummeting deeper, as if caught in an underwater current of impossible strength. "We're sinking again," I said, my voice sounding hollow in the cramped confines of the mini-sub. Sarah lay unconscious near the rear bulkhead, a gash across her forehead no longer bleeding. Robert slumped in his seat, his breathing shallow but stable. Only David remained somewhat alert beside me, his fingers moving weakly across the control panel. "Controls aren't responding," he mumbled, tapping at unresponsive screens. "Something's pulling us down." The mini-sub's hull groaned as we continued our descent. The depth readings made no sense. We had passed 6,000 feet, then 7,000, far beyond what the mini-sub's hull was rated to withstand. We should have been crushed, the pressure turning our bodies to pulp in an instant. Yet somehow the hull maintained its integrity. I stared at the viewport, watching total darkness slide past. Our external lights barely penetrated a few feet into the gloom. The sensation of falling intensified, the mini-sub picking up speed as if drawn by some massive gravitational force. "This can't be right," I said, tapping the depth gauge. "We're approaching 10,000 feet. We should be dead." David's face looked ghostly in the dim emergency lighting. "Maybe we already are." I reached out to check the external pressure readings when the mini-sub suddenly passed through. Something. The quality of the darkness changed. The crushing sensation that had been building in my ears abruptly disappeared. I felt a moment of weightlessness, then a bone-jarring impact as we hit what felt like solid ground. The jolt threw me forward against the control panel. Pain exploded in my chest, then subsided with unnatural quickness. I pushed myself back into my seat, noticing that the external pressure gauge had dropped to near normal levels. "That's impossible," David whispered, staring at the same reading. Behind us, Sarah stirred, then sat up with a groan. She touched her forehead where the gash had been, looking confused when her fingers came away clean. "I was bleeding," she said, her voice raspy. I looked at her injury, or where it had been. The wound had closed, leaving only a faint red mark that was fading even as I watched. "What happened to us?" Sarah asked, moving forward to check on Robert. "Last thing I remember, we were being crushed." "I don't know," I admitted. "We should be dead from the pressure alone, yet here we are." David was studying the mini-sub systems, frowning at the readings. "Captain, the external sensors are... They're reading an atmospheric environment outside, with oxygen." "That's not possible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew we had long since passed the boundaries of what was possible. I reached for the exterior light controls, increasing their intensity to maximum. What they revealed made us all fall silent. We weren't in water anymore. The mini-sub rested on a solid surface, some kind of smooth, slightly iridescent material that curved away into the distance. Above and around us stretched an enormous cavern, so vast that our lights couldn't reach its ceiling or walls. But what stole my breath wasn't the cavern itself, but what filled it. In the distance, perhaps half a mile away, rose structures unlike anything I had ever seen. They curved and flowed like frozen waves, their surfaces glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed gently. The architecture had no sharp angles or straight lines. Everything curved organically, as if the buildings had grown rather than been constructed. Bridges of the same material connected the structures, forming a complex network that stretched into the darkness beyond our light's reach. "My God," Sarah breathed, pressing close to the viewport. "It's a city." "An abandoned city," David added, pointing to sensor readings. "No heat signatures consistent with human life." Robert groaned behind us, finally regaining consciousness. His eyes fluttered open, then widened as he took in our surroundings. "Where the hell are we?" he asked, pushing himself up from his seat. "According to our instruments, we're approximately 12,000 feet below sea level," I told him, "in what appears to be an air-filled cavern." "That's not possible, I know," I finished for him. "And yet, here we are." Robert moved to his own station, checking the sensor readings. "I'm picking up life signs, but they're strange, not human, scattered throughout the structures." "Animals?" Sarah suggested. "Maybe," Robert said, unconvinced, "or something else entirely." I made a decision. "We need to get a better look. David, can you get the hatch open?" David hesitated. "Sir, the air might be toxic." "The sensors say it's breathable," I countered. "And staying here isn't an option. The mini-sub's power cells won't last forever." With obvious reluctance, David moved to the hatch controls. Running final atmospheric analysis, oxygen levels slightly higher than Earth normal, nitrogen present, trace elements we can't identify, but nothing immediately toxic. "Open it," I ordered. The hatch mechanism whirred, then clicked. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the door cracked open. I expected a rush of foul air, but what entered instead was surprisingly fresh, carrying a strange metallic taste that tickled the back of my throat. I climbed out first, dropping down onto the smooth surface beneath our mini-sub. It felt warm to the touch, almost body temperature, and had a slight give to it, like hardened rubber. The material stretched away in all directions, forming what appeared to be a landing platform of some kind. One by one, the others joined me. We stood in silence, taking in our surroundings. The air felt thick and oddly energized, as if charged with static electricity, I could feel it on my skin, raising the fine hairs on my arms. "We should be dead," Sarah said quietly, voicing what we were all thinking. The pressure at this depth would have crushed the mini-sub instantly. "Something brought us here," I said, remembering the sensation of being pulled downward. Something wanted us alive. The thought was far from comforting. We gathered what supplies we could from the mini-sub, emergency rations, a first aid kit, and the few weapons we had, a flare gun and 2 combat knives. David managed to get a portable scanner working to monitor air quality and keep track of the life signs Robert had detected. "Which way?" Sarah asked, looking toward the glowing structures. I pointed to the largest building, a massive structure that rose higher than the others, stretching up into the darkness until it disappeared from view. Unlike the other buildings, this one pulsed with a deeper blue light, almost indigo. "There, it seems to be the center of the city." We set off across the landing platform, our footsteps echoing strangely. The sound seemed to travel farther than it should, bouncing back from unseen surfaces with a quality that was hard to describe, both muffled and amplified at the same time. As we approached the edge of the platform, we found what looked like a road leading toward the city. Like the platform, it was made of the same slightly yielding material, but this pulsed with faint light in response to our footsteps. Each step triggered ripples of blue-white luminescence that spread outward before fading. "It's reactive," David observed, stamping his foot to create more ripples. "Some kind of energy-conductive material." "The whole place feels alive," Sarah said, looking around uneasily. "Like it's watching us." I knew what she meant. Despite the absence of visible inhabitants, the city didn't feel abandoned. It felt waiting. The road led us between the first structures, buildings that curved and twisted in ways that seemed to defy structural engineering. Some spiraled upward like massive shells, while others spread outward like frozen splashes of water. All glowed with the same pulsing blue light, creating an ambient illumination that cast few shadows. Between the buildings grew what I could only describe as plants, though unlike any I had seen before. They resembled coral formations more than terrestrial vegetation, with translucent fronds that swayed despite the absence of any breeze. They too glowed, their light pulsing in perfect synchronization with the buildings around them. "The plants are responding to the same energy source as the structures," David said, scanning one particularly large specimen. "They're all connected somehow." We continued deeper into the city, the buildings growing larger and more complex. Wide avenues branched off in all directions, some climbing upward at impossible angles, others diving downward into pools of deeper darkness. Everywhere was the same eerie silence, broken only by our footsteps and the occasional sound of water dripping somewhere in the distance. "Still no sign of inhabitants," Robert reported, checking his scanner. "But the life signs are stronger now. They're concentrated in that direction." He pointed toward the central structure we were heading for. The closer we got to the central building, the more details became visible. What I had taken for smooth surfaces showed intricate patterns up close, swirling designs etched into the material, filled with a luminescent substance that flowed like liquid light. Some patterns resembled writing, with complex symbols repeated at regular intervals. Sarah stopped to examine one such panel. "These look like logographs," she said, tracing the symbols with her finger. "Similar to ancient Sumerian cuneiform, but more complex." "You can read this?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not exactly, but I recognize the structure. These are definitely language symbols, not just decorative patterns." We pressed on, the central structure looming larger with each step. What had seemed like a single building from a distance revealed itself to be a complex of interconnected structures, all centered around a massive tower that rose hundreds of feet into the cavern ceiling. The tower's base was surrounded by a circular plaza paved with the same reactive material as the road. But here, the light pulsed in complex patterns, flowing inward toward the tower entrance. The entrance itself was a towering archway, easily 50 feet high and 30 wide. No doors blocked our way, just an opening that led into blue-lit darkness. Above the arch, a massive symbol had been carved, a spiral design that pulsed with a deeper, more intense light than anything else we had seen. "It looks like a temple," Sarah whispered. I nodded, feeling a strange pull toward the entrance. Something waited inside, something that had called us here for a purpose I couldn't yet grasp. The weight of the ocean above us, the impossible nature of this place, the fate of my ship and crew, all these thoughts pressed down on me as I stared into that beckoning darkness. "We go in," I said, more to myself than to the others. As we approached the entrance, the light patterns on the plaza intensified, flowing more rapidly toward the archway. The air seemed to thicken further, carrying a faint vibration that I could feel in my chest rather than hear. The metallic taste grew stronger, mixing with something else, an almost sweet flavor that reminded me of ozone after a lightning strike. We stopped at the threshold, looking into the vast interior space beyond. Inside, the blue light pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat, revealing glimpses of a cavernous hall filled with more of the strange symbols. They covered the walls from floor to ceiling, some small and intricate, others massive and bold. "What is this place?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath of the strange air, feeling it fill my lungs with that metallic sweet taste. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but I think we're about to find out." I stepped through the archway, the others following close behind. Our footsteps echoed off surfaces that seemed designed to carry sound in ways I didn't understand. The blue light brightened around us, as if responding to our presence, illuminating a path deeper into the heart of the temple. The silence was absolute now, broken only by the sound of our breathing and the soft fall of our feet on the yielding floor. The sense of being watched intensified with every step, though we remained alone in the vast, empty space, 4 survivors from a world above, drawn inexorably into the heart of a mystery that lay thousands of feet below the ocean floor. I stepped deeper into the temple, the light pulsing around us as if responding to our presence. The cavernous hall stretched before us, its dimensions impossible to fully comprehend in the shifting blue illumination. As we moved forward, the walls began to reveal themselves in greater detail. What I had initially taken for abstract patterns resolved into something far more significant: murals. Detailed, intricate artworks covered every surface, stretching from floor to ceiling in a continuous narrative. I approached the nearest wall, stunned by the level of craftsmanship. "These are incredible," I said, my voice echoing strangely in the vast chamber. The murals depicted humanoid figures, similar to humans in basic shape but with clear differences. Elongated limbs that seemed almost graceful in their exaggerated proportions. Large almond-shaped eyes that dominated their faces, and what appeared to be gill-like structures along their necks. They moved through scenes of daily life in the underwater city we had just walked through, the buildings instantly recognizable. "They built all this," David said, moving his light across the images. "An entire civilization, miles below the ocean surface." Sarah had gravitated toward a section where symbols clustered densely between the images. Her fingers traced the markings gently, eyes narrowed in concentration. "These symbols share structural similarities with several ancient Earth languages," she said. "There are elements that remind me of Sumerian cuneiform, but also components similar to Proto-Elamite and even some Indus Valley script characteristics." "You can read any of it?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not exactly read, but I can recognize patterns. This section appears repeatedly, almost like a warning or incantation." We continued along the wall, following the mural's narrative. The scenes changed, showing the humanoid beings living in harmony with massive sea creatures, beings that seemed to serve as guardians or protectors of the city. These creatures bore little resemblance to anything I recognized from marine biology, some with multiple limbs like cephalopods but scaled like fish, others with elongated bodies and what appeared to be bioluminescent organs. Robert pointed to one particular guardian depicted majestically. Look at the size comparison. If these murals are to scale, these guardian creatures were enormous. Like living submarines, David added. Maybe even larger. The peaceful scenes continued for several panels until a dramatic shift occurred. The next section of murals showed darkness creeping in from the ocean depths, represented by swirls of black and deep purple that seemed to consume the light around them. From this darkness emerged a shape that made my blood run cold. A massive creature with writhing tentacles, its body a twisted mass of limbs and what looked like multiple mouths. "That's it," I said quietly. "That's what attacked the Connecticut." No one disputed my identification. We had all seen those tentacles wrapped around our submarine's hull, felt the impossible strength as they crushed through metal and composite materials rated to withstand the crushing pressures of the deep ocean. Sarah had moved to the symbols adjacent to this section of the mural. "These repeat more urgently here," she said. "The pattern changes, becomes more complex. I think they're describing the creature." She pointed to specific clusters of markings. "This grouping appears whenever the creature is shown, and these symbols here, they're associated with concepts of darkness, depth, and hunger in several ancient languages." "They knew it was coming," David said. "Or they knew it was already there, waiting in the deep," I corrected. The next panels showed the devastation brought by the creature's attack. The beautiful spires of the city crumbled, the guardian creatures were torn apart, and the humanoid inhabitants fled in terror. The artists had captured expressions of horror and despair with haunting precision. We moved deeper into the temple, following the story depicted on the walls. David paused frequently to examine technical elements shown in the murals. "Captain, look at this," he said, pointing to images of the humanoids working with strange devices. "These appear to be some kind of pressure manipulation technology. See how they're creating these bubbles around sections of the city? They weren't just adapting to deep-sea pressure, they were actively controlling it." He moved to another panel showing the beings working with what looked like crystalline structures. "And here, these might explain how they created air pockets at this depth. This technology is beyond anything we've even theorized. They weren't just surviving down here, they were thriving." The technology depicted in the murals made our own advancements seem primitive by comparison. Devices that controlled water pressure, systems that generated breathable atmosphere thousands of feet underwater, energy sources that appeared to harness power from the deep ocean itself. Whatever this civilization had been, they had mastered their environment in ways we could barely comprehend. Robert had moved ahead, studying his scanner. "The energy readings are getting stronger. Something big is generating power up ahead." We continued following the murals, watching as the story progressed. After the initial devastation, the panels showed the surviving inhabitants gathering with their remaining guardian creatures. They appeared to be formulating a plan, creating new devices, and preparing for a final confrontation with the monster. The culminating panels were larger and more detailed than anything we had seen before. They showed a massive battle, the guardian creatures and the humanoids facing the tentacled horror together. But it wasn't a victory they depicted. It was a sacrifice. "They didn't defeat it," I said, understanding dawning as I studied the images. "They trapped it." The mural showed the guardians forming a circle around the creature, channeling some kind of energy that created a barrier or seal. Many of the guardians were shown with light pouring from their bodies, their forms dissolving as they apparently gave their life force to power the seal. "They sacrificed themselves to contain it," Sarah said softly. The final battle panel showed the creature being forced down into a deep trench surrounded by the energy barrier, while the few surviving humanoids watched from the city above. The symbols here were larger, more elaborate. Sarah studied them intently. "This section seems to be a warning, something about maintaining the seal, not disturbing the deep place." She looked up at me, her expression grave. "I think our submarine broke their seal, Captain." The thought hit me like a physical blow. Our mission, our presence in those waters. We had somehow disrupted an ancient prison that had held this horror for who knows how long. The Connecticut hadn't just been attacked, it had been the unwitting key that unlocked a cage. "The nuclear reactor," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "All that energy. If the seal was weakening already, the reactor might have provided the final push." We had reached the end of the mural-covered walls. The passage opened into a vast circular chamber, its ceiling rising so high that our lights couldn't illuminate it. The blue glow was stronger here, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded me uncomfortably of a heartbeat. At the center of the chamber stood what we had come to find, a massive crystal formation that rose from floor to ceiling, its surface faceted and complex. Unlike the smooth materials of the city, the crystal had a jagged, almost aggressive geometry. Its surface was covered in the same symbols we had seen throughout the temple, but here they appeared to be carved directly into the crystal itself, each marking filled with luminescent material that flowed like liquid light. "This is the source of the energy readings," Robert confirmed, checking his scanner. "Electromagnetic activity off the charts. It's putting out more power than a nuclear reactor, but there's no radiation." "It's their technology," David said, circling the crystal cautiously. "Maybe some kind of power source for the entire city." Sarah approached it more boldly, examining the symbols. "These are the same as the warning sections. Whatever this is, it's connected to the creature and the seal." I felt drawn to the crystal, an inexplicable pull that I couldn't rationalize. As the others continued their examination, I found myself moving closer, my hand reaching out almost of its own accord. "Captain," David called, noticing my movement. "I wouldn't touch that until we know more about—" His warning came too late. My palm pressed against the cool surface of the crystal. The contact sent an immediate shock through my system. Not painful, but overwhelming, like plunging into ice water. The crystal's glow intensified dramatically, changing from blue to a brilliant white that forced the others to shield their eyes. But I couldn't look away. I couldn't move at all. My hand seemed fused to the crystal's surface as images began flooding my mind. I saw the city as it had been, vibrant, alive, filled with the humanoid beings going about their daily lives. I felt their emotions, their connection to the ocean and its creatures, their harmony with their environment. Then came the darkness from below, the first attack, the panic and horror as their guardians fell. The visions shifted, showing me the desperate plans, the creation of the seal, the final battle that cost them nearly everything. I witnessed the survivors rebuilding what they could of their civilization, knowing it would never be what it once was, their numbers too few, their greatest guardians gone. Then a woman appeared in my mind, one of the humanoids, but distinct somehow. Her large eyes held both incredible age and deep sorrow. When she spoke, her words formed directly in my thoughts, bypassing my ears entirely. "The last of us are gone now," she said, her mental voice carrying complex emotions I struggled to process. "I am but an echo, preserved within the crystal to warn those who might come after. The devourer stirs in its prison. You have weakened the seal with your presence, with your energy source." I tried to respond, to explain we hadn't known, but no words came. "The sacrifices of our guardians bought us time, but not victory," she continued. "The devourer cannot be killed by any means we discovered. It can only be contained, and now that containment fails." She showed me the creature again, but from a perspective that revealed its true nature, an ancient entity that consumed life energy itself, growing stronger with each being it absorbed. I saw it feeding on the guardians, their life force visible as it was drained away and added to the creature's power. "Your vessel provided the final energy it needed," she said. "The seal breaks completely. The devourer will return to finish what it began here, and then it will rise to your world above." I wanted to ask how to stop it, how to fight something that had defeated a civilization far more advanced than our own. But before I could form the question, the crystal began to vibrate beneath my palm. The woman's image fragmented, her voice becoming distorted. "Prepare yourselves," were her final words before the connection shattered completely. The energy surge threw me backward, breaking my contact with the crystal. I landed hard on the temple floor, my mind reeling from the experience. David and Robert rushed to help me up while Sarah watched the crystal with wide eyes. "Captain, what happened?" David asked, helping me to my feet. "You were frozen there for almost 5 minutes." 5 minutes? It had felt like hours, like I had lived through centuries of this place's history. "I saw them," I said, my voice sounding strange even to myself. "I saw what happened here. I spoke with someone. The last of them, preserved somehow in that crystal." "What did she tell you?" Sarah asked, somehow knowing it had been a woman. Before I could answer, the temple shuddered around us. Dust and small fragments fell from the ceiling as a low rumble built beneath our feet. "Something's happening," Robert said, checking his scanner again. "The energy readings are spiking everywhere. It's like the whole city is waking up." Or something else was. The energy surge threw me backward with enough force to knock the wind from my lungs. I landed hard on the temple floor, my head spinning with images and knowledge that felt too vast to contain. David and Robert rushed to help me up, while Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the crystal, which now pulsed with an erratic, urgent rhythm. "Captain, what happened?" David asked, gripping my arm to steady me. "You were frozen there for almost 5 minutes." 5 minutes? The experience had felt like hours, like I'd lived through centuries of this civilization's history in moments. "I saw them," I said, my voice hoarse. "I saw what happened here. I spoke with someone. The last of them, preserved in that crystal." "What did she tell you?" Sarah asked, somehow knowing the gender of the being I'd communicated with. Before I could answer, the entire temple shuddered around us. Dust and fragments of material rained down from the ceiling as a deep rumble built beneath our feet. The crystal's pulsing increased in speed and intensity. "Something's happening," Robert said, checking his scanner with widening eyes. "Energy readings are spiking everywhere. It's like the whole city is waking up." "Not waking," I said, finding my balance. "Dying. We need to leave. Now." "What did you see in there?" Sarah pressed, even as another, stronger tremor shook the chamber. "The creature that attacked our submarine. They called it the Devourer. It feeds on life energy itself. These people, whoever they were, they didn't kill it. They couldn't. They only managed to trap it, and that seal has been weakening for decades." I looked at the crystal, its light now pulsing frantically. Our submarine's nuclear reactor gave it the final push it needed to break free completely. A massive crack appeared in the far wall of the chamber, spreading upward with frightening speed as the rumbling intensified. "It's coming," I said, backing toward the entrance we'd used. "We need to get back to the mini-sub. Move." We ran from the chamber, the beautiful symbols and murals now trembling and cracking around us. The once solid floor beneath our feet had developed a slight give, as if the material itself was losing cohesion. The blue light that had illuminated our way now flickered erratically, plunging sections of the temple into momentary darkness before flaring back to life. "The whole place is falling apart," David shouted over the growing noise. "Whatever power kept it stable all these years is failing." We reached the main hall where the narrative murals stretched from floor to ceiling. Many were already damaged, cracks spreading across the once perfect surfaces. The entrance arch ahead of us remained intact, the plaza beyond visible through the opening. A deafening crash stopped us in our tracks. The wall to our right exploded inward in a shower of debris. Through the massive hole, a nightmare emerged, a tentacle thicker than my body, its surface covered in pulsing patterns of stolen light. The appendage swept across the hall, smashing into the opposite wall with enough force to shake the entire structure. "Run!" I shouted, pushing Sarah ahead of me as more tentacles crashed through the walls, ceiling, and floor. We sprinted for the exit, dodging falling debris and the creature's writhing limbs. One tentacle slammed down directly in our path, blocking the way forward. Without hesitation, Robert leapt over it, followed by David. Sarah hesitated, looking back at me. Go, I urged her. She jumped across just as the tentacle began to rise again. I waited until it lifted high enough, then rolled beneath it, feeling the rush of air as it crashed down behind me. We burst out of the temple onto the plaza, where the destruction was even more apparent. The beautiful structures of the city were collapsing one by one, their glowing surfaces dimming as whatever energy had maintained them for centuries finally failed. The bridges between buildings crashed into the cavern floor, and the plant-like organisms withered and crumbled to dust. "Which way to the mini-sub?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of destruction. I oriented myself, trying to recall our path through the city. "This way," I said, pointing to a road that still glowed faintly beneath our feet. "Follow the light path." We ran through the dying city, the road beneath us responding sluggishly to our footsteps with weak pulses of light. Behind us, the temple's central tower collapsed in on itself, sending a shockwave across the plaza that nearly knocked us off our feet. The cavern itself seemed to be contracting, the ceiling dropping lower as support structures failed. What had once been an enormous open space now felt increasingly claustrophobic, the air growing thick with dust and debris. Through gaps in the falling buildings, I caught glimpses of the creature. Its full form remained hidden, but dozens of tentacles whipped through the city, demolishing anything they touched. Each appendage glowed with the same bioluminescent patterns we'd seen before, but now I understood what they were: the stolen life energy of countless victims, including the guardians who had sacrificed themselves to contain it. "There," Robert pointed ahead to where the landing platform came into view. Our mini-sub sat exactly where we'd left it, undamaged so far. We sprinted the final distance, acutely aware of the destruction closing in behind us. David reached the mini-sub first, yanking the hatch open and jumping inside to start the pre-launch sequence. Robert followed, then Sarah. I was last, turning to look back at the city one final time. The beautiful alien metropolis that had survived for who knows how many thousands of years was disappearing before my eyes. Buildings that had stood against the crushing pressure of the deep ocean for millennia crumbled like sandcastles. The soft blue glow that had illuminated everything was fading, replaced by darkness punctuated only by the sickly light of the creature's tentacles. "Captain," Sarah called from the mini-sub's hatch, "we need to go." I turned away from the destruction and climbed inside. David had already taken the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. "Systems powering up," he reported. "Emergency ascent ready on your command." "Get us out of here," I ordered, securing the hatch behind me. The mini-sub hummed to life, its engines straining as David engaged the thrusters. We lifted off the platform, turning toward open water. A massive tentacle crashed down directly in front of us, blocking our path. David swerved, barely avoiding a collision. Another tentacle swept in from the left, forcing him to dive beneath it. "There's too many," Robert shouted as more appendages converged on our position. "The creature knows we're trying to escape," I said, remembering the Guardian's warning. "It won't let us reach the surface to warn others." David continued his desperate evasive maneuvers, but with each passing second, more tentacles filled the space around us. Our options dwindled as the creature seemed to anticipate our movements. "We can't outrun it," David said, his voice tight with concentration. "And we can't outmaneuver it much longer." "What about the torpedo?" Sarah suggested. "The mini-sub has one conventional warhead for emergency clearing operations." "Against that thing?" Robert sounded doubtful. "It crushed a nuclear submarine. What's one small torpedo going to do?" I remembered something from the vision, a glimpse of the final battle when the Guardians had wounded the creature before containing it. "There," I said, pointing to where one massive tentacle joined a larger mass partly visible through the collapsing structures. "That junction looks different. See how the light patterns change there? I think it's a wound from the ancient battle, maybe a weak point." Sarah moved to the weapons console. "Torpedo armed and ready," she reported after a moment. "Manual targeting active." David positioned the mini-sub as best he could, dodging tentacles while trying to maintain a clear line to the target. Sarah focused intently on the targeting display, her finger hovering over the launch button. "Now!" I commanded. She pressed the button. The mini-sub shuddered as the torpedo launched, streaking toward the creature's body. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought it would miss as a tentacle moved to intercept it. But the torpedo slipped past and struck exactly where I'd indicated. The explosion was small compared to the creature's enormous size, but its effect was immediate and dramatic. A shriek of pain reverberated through the water with such force that the mini-sub's hull vibrated. The tentacles that had been coordinating to capture us suddenly spasmed and withdrew. "It worked," Robert exclaimed, but our relief was short-lived. The explosion had triggered something else, a massive underwater current that caught our mini-sub like a leaf in a storm. We were suddenly rocketing upward at terrifying speed, thrown against our restraints as the vessel spun and tumbled. "Hold on!" David shouted, fighting with the controls. "The stabilizers can't handle this kind of acceleration." The mini-sub's hull groaned under the strain, seams creaking as we were pushed beyond our structural limits. Through the viewport, I caught a final glimpse of the ancient city disappearing into darkness below us, centuries of preservation ending in minutes. The current carried us upward with increasing velocity, the depth gauge spinning backward faster than I could track. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as we surpassed the mini-sub's rated ascent speed. If we continued rising this fast, the changing pressure could tear us apart before we reached the surface. "Can you slow us down?" I asked David. He shook his head, still wrestling with the unresponsive controls. "Negative. We're caught in something like an underwater cyclone. All I can do is try to keep us oriented properly." The hull creaked again, louder this time. A thin spray of water appeared from a seam near the ceiling, quickly growing into a steady trickle. "We're losing hull integrity," Robert reported unnecessarily. "If we don't slow down soon..." He didn't need to finish the thought. We all knew what would happen if the mini-sub broke apart at depth. I watched the depth gauge continue its rapid countdown. 5,000 feet, 4,000, 3,000, each number representing a boundary we were crossing too quickly. The mini-sub shuddered continuously now, the entire structure protesting against forces it wasn't designed to withstand. More leaks appeared, water spraying from multiple points along the hull. The air filled with a fine mist of seawater as pressure differences forced the ocean inside through any available gap. The temperature dropped rapidly as cold water infiltrated our environment. 2,000 feet, Sarah called out, watching the gauge. "We're still ascending too fast." "Brace for potential hull breach," I ordered, securing my harness tighter. "If we lose pressure containment, remember your emergency breathing training." But even as I said it, I knew such measures would be futile if the hull failed completely. At this depth, the pressure would crush us instantly. The mini-sub lurched violently to one side, throwing us against our restraints. For a terrifying moment, I thought we'd been caught by the creature again. Then I realized the current had changed direction, becoming even more chaotic as we approached the thermocline layer where cold, deep water met warmer surface currents. 1,000 feet, Sarah reported, her voice tight with tension. "Coming up on safe diving depth. If we could just reach 500 feet, we might have a chance, even if the mini-sub broke apart." That depth was within the theoretical survival range for emergency ascent procedures. The hull gave a final, protesting groan as we passed through the thermal boundary. Then, abruptly, the violent current released us. The mini-sub's wild spinning slowed, and David managed to regain some control over our ascent. "We're free of the current," he reported, his hands steady on the controls despite the strain evident in his voice. "Reducing ascent speed to safe parameters." The warning lights on the control panel began switching from red to amber as our velocity decreased to within acceptable limits. The leaks didn't stop, but they no longer increased in severity. We continued rising toward the surface, the mini-sub damaged but intact. 500 feet, Sarah announced with obvious relief. We're in safe emergency ascent range. I allowed myself to relax slightly, unclenching hands that had gripped my seat with white-knuckle force. The worst of the danger appeared to be behind us, at least for the moment. "What about the creature?" Robert asked, glancing nervously at the depth below us. "Could it follow us?" "I don't know," I admitted. "The Guardian said it would eventually rise to the surface, but she didn't specify how quickly." We watched the depth gauge continue its now controlled countdown. 400 feet, 300, 200. Sunlight became visible through the viewport, the first natural light we'd seen since the Connecticut's destruction. The water outside changed from black to deep blue, then to a lighter azure as we approached the surface. 100 feet, Sarah said. Almost there. The mini-sub broke the surface with a gentle splash, bobbing in the open ocean under a clear blue sky. Through the viewport, I could see nothing but water stretching to the horizon in all directions. No ships, no land, no sign of rescue, just endless blue. But we were alive. We had escaped the ancient city and the monster that had claimed the Connecticut. We had witnessed things no human was ever meant to see and carried knowledge of a threat few would believe. As David stabilized our position and began checking systems, I thought about the Guardian's final warning. The creature would not remain in the depths forever. It would eventually rise to our world, bringing with it an appetite that could never be satisfied. Our escape wasn't an ending. It was barely even a beginning. The sun hung low on the western horizon, casting long orange rays across the ocean's surface. We'd been drifting for 12 hours since our escape from the depths, the mini-sub bobbing like a cork on the waves. Water continued to seep through the cracked hull, forcing us to take turns manually pumping it out every 20 minutes to keep from sinking. None of us had slept. The adrenaline had worn off hours ago, leaving us hollow-eyed and silent as we waited for rescue or death. I sat near the viewport, watching the endless blue meet the sky at the horizon. My shoulder ached where I'd been thrown against the bulkhead during our ascent, but the pain felt distant, unimportant. My mind kept returning to the images I'd seen in the crystal, an ancient civilization destroyed, guardians sacrificing themselves, a warning that came too late. And beneath those thoughts, the face of Lucas appeared whenever I closed my eyes. My oldest friend, gone in an instant, along with nearly 100 other crew members of the Connecticut. "Captain," Robert called, his voice hoarse from thirst. He pointed through the cracked viewport. "Look." On the horizon, dark shapes appeared, growing larger by the minute. Ships, 4 of them, cutting through the water toward our position. The lead vessel was unmistakable even at a distance, the massive outline of an aircraft carrier. "That's the Reagan," David said, recognizing the silhouette of the USS Ronald Reagan. "They found us." Sarah laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise even her after so many hours of tense silence. I never thought I'd be so happy to see an aircraft carrier in my life. As the ships drew closer, we could make out smaller vessels dispatched from the carrier, rigid hull inflatables moving swiftly across the waves toward us. I popped the mini-sub's emergency hatch, and the 4 of us climbed out onto the hull, waving our arms above our heads. The rescue happened quickly after that. Navy personnel in combat gear pulled alongside our sinking mini-sub, helping us into their boat. The sailors asked no questions beyond our immediate medical needs, which struck me as unusual. Standard protocol would include basic debriefing questions about what had happened, but these men maintained rigid silence about our circumstances. They transported us to the Reagan, where we were greeted by a medical team waiting on the deck. As they checked us over, I looked around at the massive carrier. The flight deck bustled with activity. Helicopters spinning up, personnel moving with clear purpose. This wasn't just a rescue operation. The carrier stood at the center of what appeared to be a defensive perimeter, with destroyer escorts positioned at strategic intervals around a section of ocean. They were containing something. As the medical team finished their preliminary examination, a man in naval uniform approached. He wore commander's insignia and carried himself with the stiff posture of someone following uncomfortable orders. "Captain Reynolds," he said with a brief nod. "I'm Commander Williams, Executive Officer of the Reagan. I need you to come with me immediately." I glanced at my crew members, who were being attended to by separate medical personnel. "My team will be well taken care of," Williams cut me off, "but I have orders to bring you to Briefing Room 1 immediately." Before I could protest further, 2 armed Marines appeared behind the commander, making it clear this wasn't a request. I looked at Sarah, David, and Robert, trying to convey reassurance I didn't feel. "I'll find you as soon as I can," I told them. The commander led me through the carrier's maze of corridors, the Marines following close behind. We descended several levels, moving deeper into the secure areas of the ship. Finally, he stopped at a heavy door with an electronic lock. He swiped his key card, waited for the green light, and pushed it open. "Captain Reynolds has arrived," he announced to the room's occupants before stepping back to let me enter. The briefing room was small and windowless, dominated by a conference table with several chairs. 3 civilians, 2 men and a woman, sat on the far side, all wearing identical dark suits that screamed government agency. The woman sat in the center, flanked by the men like bodyguards. In front of each was a thick folder stamped with security classifications I'd never seen before. The door closed behind me with a heavy click. Commander Williams had not entered with me. I was alone with the 3 strangers. "Captain James Reynolds," the woman said, breaking the silence. She didn't stand or offer her hand. "I'm Dr. Patricia Williams. These are my colleagues, Mr. Chen and Mr. Kaufman." Neither man acknowledged the introduction. "Where's my crew?" I asked, remaining standing. "Please, sit down," Dr. Williams said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Your crew members are receiving medical attention and will be debriefed separately." I didn't move. "I want to see them." "You will, Captain. But first, we need to talk." There was something in her tone that made me reconsider my stance. She wasn't asking. I pulled out the chair and sat down, noting the slight tremble in my hands, exhaustion finally catching up with me. "You're wondering why you've been separated from your team and brought here," she said, opening the folder in front of her. "And you're wondering who we are." "Among other things," I replied. She looked up, studying me with calculating eyes. "I'm part of a classified government program that has been monitoring deep ocean anomalies for the past 40 years. Officially, we don't exist. Unofficially, we're the only thing standing between humanity and what you encountered down there." My mouth went dry. "You knew about the creature." "Not specifically the one you encountered, but others like it, yes." She slid several photographs across the table toward me. They showed sonar images similar to what Robert had detected before the Connecticut was attacked. These were taken at various deep ocean locations over the past 4 decades. South Pacific, North Atlantic, Indian Ocean. They're everywhere, Captain. Dormant, contained, but very much alive. I picked up one of the images, showing what looked like a massive shape nestled in a trench. "How long have they been down there?" "Longer than recorded human history," she replied. "What you saw in that underwater city, it wasn't unique. There were civilizations, advanced ones, that existed before any we know of. They fought these creatures and managed to contain them, but couldn't destroy them." The man called Chen spoke for the first time, his voice flat and clinical. "We've found evidence of similar underwater structures on every continent, some better preserved than others, all with the same purpose, prisons for these entities." I thought of the murals, the desperate last stand of the Guardians. "The crystal," I said. "In the temple, I saw everything. Their history, their war, their sacrifice." Dr. Williams leaned forward slightly, the first sign of genuine interest crossing her face. "You made direct contact with their technology? What exactly did you experience?" I described the vision as best I could, the civilization at its height, the attack, the final desperate plan to contain the creature rather than destroy it. As I spoke, She took notes, occasionally exchanging glances with her colleagues. "This confirms our theories," she said when I finished. "We've never had anyone successfully interface with one of their communication devices before. The few we've recovered were dormant or damaged." "Why wasn't my team warned?" I asked, feeling anger rise through my exhaustion. "You sent us down there knowing what might be waiting." The Connecticut's mission was to investigate sonar readings that suggested something was stirring in that particular trench, Dr. Williams admitted. "But based on our monitoring, we believed the containment would hold for at least another century." "What changed?" "Climate change, for one thing," Kaufman spoke up, his voice surprisingly soft compared to his imposing frame. "Rising ocean temperatures affect deep currents, which in turn affect the geological stability of the trenches where many of these creatures are contained. And human activity," Chen added. "Deep sea mining, oil exploration, submarine traffic, all of it creates vibrations and energy signatures that disturb things better left undisturbed." "So you sent us in blind," I said, not bothering to hide my anger. 100 men dead because you didn't think we needed to know what we were really looking for. Dr. Williams met my gaze without flinching. "Would it have made a difference, Captain? If we had told you you were looking for a mythological sea monster that's been asleep for 20,000 years, would you have approached the mission any differently? Or would you, like most rational people, have thought we were insane?" I had no answer for that. She was right. I wouldn't have believed them without seeing it myself. "The creature that attacked your submarine," she continued after a moment, "is still alive. The blast from your torpedo injured it, but these entities are remarkably resilient. It retreated deeper into the ocean for now, but our models suggest it will eventually return to the surface unless stopped." "How do you stop something that an entire civilization couldn't kill?" I asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out." She closed her folder and looked at me with an evaluative gaze. "Which brings me to why you're here, Captain Reynolds. Our program needs experienced naval officers who have actually encountered these entities, people who understand what we're facing because they've seen it firsthand. You want to recruit me?" She nodded. "You have a choice. You can return to civilian life with your retirement benefits and a very comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You'll never speak of what you saw, and eventually you might even convince yourself it wasn't real. Or you can join our task force, help us find and contain the remaining creatures before more seals fail." She slid another folder across the table. "Your clearance has already been approved. All you need to do is sign." I stared at the folder without opening it. Images flashed through my mind, Lucas's voice cutting off as water flooded the engineering section, the crystal showing the ancient guardians sacrificing themselves, the city crumbling as we fled. "What about my team?" I asked. "Sarah, David, and Robert?" "They'll be offered the same choice," Dr. Williams said. "Separately. Each must decide for themselves." I thought about the warning from the Guardian preserved in the crystal. The creature, the Devourer, would return to finish what it started and then rise to our world above. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning. "I'll need to know everything," I said finally. "No more secrets, no more half-truths. If I'm going to fight these things, I need to know what we're up against." Dr. Williams exchanged glances with her colleagues before nodding. "Agreed." I opened the folder and found a single document inside. The contract was brief, the language stark. In signing, I would be joining a program called Abyssal Shield, dedicated to monitoring and containing deep-sea anomalies. My naval rank would transfer, but my command would now fall under this new authority. I thought of Lucas again, of his concerns when we first received those vague orders to dive. I thought of my crew, most of them now lying at the bottom of the ocean in a crushed submarine. And I thought of what might happen if these creatures, all of them, broke free of their ancient prisons. I picked up the pen and signed my name. Dr. Williams took the contract, checking my signature before placing it back in the folder. "Welcome to Abyssal Shield, Captain Reynolds. Your war has just begun."